someone got in my way, so I don't have eyes from the back of my head.
Glass and chestnut paling wired together that can be dropped into a hole, so it also helps with almost like a mini bridging equipment. The idea being military calling gap crossing. You need ways to be able to cross streams, rivers, or places where they've blown up bridges. Or again, they may have built an anti-tank ditch. So again, by dropping in a facet, means again you've got that opportunity to be able to continue over and not necessarily have to deploy your very precious asset like the Titan bricklayer. Now you can see the Titan is recovering its bridge instantly, and the whole idea there of course as well, these are assets, they're not that common in the army, so you heavily protect them. You only deploy these assets when you really need them because they are so essential, and they're also limited in number. Basically what it is a rocket fires out the back of the trailer, goes forward, and you deploy it when you're coming across a minefield or you think there's a minefield. And the idea of that rocket, it shoots forward, and then it's takes with it, it sort of pulls behind it a hose that's full of explosives. And once the rocket's landed, you can detonate it. Normally it goes forward about something like 230 meters. Once it's detonated, the whole of the hose blows up and it clears a path to a minefield up about 7 meters.
Trailers, which is one of the ideas, you carry extra fuel behind you that they used early on. There was other ideas, and later models of the Centurions, they actually added extra fuel tanks at the rear. But well done for that Centurion today for going all the way round. And again, do go and have a look at these later on when they're parked up. Have a word with the commander, the driver there, and also see, you can ask them as well. One of the other things, you always wonder what it's like driving these things. Talk to the crews, that's the sort of thing they'll be able to tell you directly. Next vehicle coming on, again a bit of a British classic. We mentioned the Saladin. This was being developed at a similar time. This is the Ferret Scout car. Scouting and liaison is the phrase they often use for these vehicles. Think of the Dingo in World War II. This is almost like a continuation of that family. The Mark I Ferret didn't have the turret on the top. And again, the idea with the Dingo and the open top vehicles is so you've got good visibility all around, because if you're doing that scouting, again, if you get a chance in the tank park, look through the periscopes on some of the vehicles in a closed down vehicle against other buildings, etc. So a very effective sort of camouflage scheme, and being used again to this day. Royal Tank Regiment just painted a couple of Challengers in that same urban camouflage scheme. Coming on now, the Chieftain, and we have an issue with the gun control kit, which is why the gun is traversed to the rear and it's in the gun lock, and it doesn't look quite as effective that way, I must admit, but, and that means a very accurate gun out to about 3 kilometres, and this would be firing metal darts, what they call fin stabilised discarding sabot rounds, when you're firing at another tank. So basically a cylinder comes out the end of the barrel at huge speed, falls away and leaves a metal dart with no explosive on it, a little bit of tracer on the back so you can see where it goes, and that metal dart, made of tungsten or depleted uranium, sheer kinetic energy will smash its way through enemy armour. Now, how do you keep all these vehicles going? And I mentioned earlier logistics. Here's another one of that Saracen family. This is the Stolly, as it was often known, or the Stalwart, FV620, the Stalwart. And this is a vehicle that, again, same 6 wheels, same engine. Driver actually sits in the middle of that cab in the front there. And what you've really got is an amphibious or all-terrain truck. And the idea being that you can carry up to 5 tons of stores in the back of the vehicle. So think ammunition, petrol to keep the vehicles going, food for the troops, all of that in the back there. And also, quite often, they have a trailer behind that can also tow an extra 10 tons. And the idea being, you need vehicles that can go to pretty similar places that your tracked vehicles have got. There's no point getting the tank somewhere and then you can't resupply them. So the Stalwart, built by Alvis, went in British Army service, out of service some years now, but it was also amphibious. And how it works is it's actually got what they call vectored thrust water jets at the back. So it actually squirts water out the rear of it to be able to propel it along if you're going across, say, an inland waterway, river, lake. You wouldn't want to go on the sea, although there is a famous story of a rather disgruntled soldier whipping one of these, heading across from France, heading back towards Britain across the English Channel. And the story goes Alvis were really disappointed that he was actually turned back in the end. Because they rather liked the idea if that vehicle had made it all the way across the channel. Boy, would that be a record. But that's the Alvis Stalwart. Again, key part of a battle group, because that's the vehicle that's going to keep you supplied and in action. About 3,000 432s, all variants of the 432 were built. And what you're really looking at is a steel box with an engine at the front, door at the back, roof hatches. And because it's such a simple vehicle, it ended up being adapted for lots and lots of other roles when it was in its service life. So as an armoured personnel carrier, you've got a section of infantry in the rear. They sort of sit on seats that face in. So they're almost like they've got individual seats. It's almost, think like benches along the sides there fitting in. Nowadays, of course, everyone had harnesses to hold you in the seat. And in its original configuration and the idea behind it, the British Army doesn't really like the soldiers or infantry fighting from inside the vehicle. They've always had the theory that the infantry should be delivered to the point of action. They do what's called debussing, and we'll see that later on today. They jump out the rear door and they finish their attack on foot. Now, quite often a 432 would have a machine gun mounted on where the commander is. You can see him sitting behind the driver at the front there. Nowadays, we tend to have what they call infantry fighting vehicles, and we'll see the Warrior a bit later on. It's got slight differences, but that theory about delivery rather than fighting from the vehicles is still maintained in the British Army. 432 still in service, by the way, is called Bulldog. And they're finding other roles, again, for a lot of the armour rather than scrapping it. Sometimes we can find other things to do with it. Now, this six-wheeler coming on now, this is Cougar. And this is another one of these vehicles that's based on a family. The original, the parent family vehicle, was designed out in Switzerland by Mowag, and it was called Piranha. And that vehicle in various configurations has been sold built under license by a number of different countries. And this particular version was built by General Motors of Canada, built from 1977 onwards. They did about 491 of these Piranha-based chassis, and in 3 different versions. They had this one Cougar, they had one called Grizzly and one called Husky. With Cougar, you can see if most of you spotters out there, you'll recognise the turret is actually from a Scorpion. That was a British Army light tank, and they reused some of the Scorpion turret. Again, that 76mm gun you can see on the Saladin, the same gun. It can fire a really good range of ammunition types, so it's very useful. So you can fire high explosive, you can fire smoke, you can fire canister, lots of pellets out the end. You can fire... Now, Chieftain, it's again what would be called a main battle tank. It's where we've given up on the idea of having different types of tanks for different roles. The Chieftain is going to take on the cruiser and the infantry role together. Very thick steel cast armour on the front, very thick armour on now a needlepoint turret, holding that gun, that 120mm gun. So they've done away with that mantlet that you see in so many other tanks, which is the bit on the front of the turret that holds the gun. Here the gun actually goes and is located in an internal trunnion system. And I mentioned before, sorry if you're hearing this for the 3rd day running, but one of the amazing things is, and then causes a scab to fly off in the inside of the enemy's tank. Now Cougar's out of service now. Very kindly the Canadian military who had these in service gave us one of them, which is why we'll be able to driving it around at the moment. Now, very distinctive engine note there. You're listening to an MTU diesel there in the back of our Leopard 1 tank that's driving around now. And again, the Leopard, that post-war tank, the first tank the Germans build when they're allowed to reform their army after World War II. Bundeswehr is reformed in '55. And initially it's equipped with mainly American tanks. But the Germans start a tank program of their own, and as ever they have a competition. The winner in essence is the Porsche company. Ferdinand Porsche is dead by now, but Porsche company wins the competition. Initially it's called the Standard Panzer, but then it goes on to be called the Leopard, and of course when it's replaced with Leopard 2, this is therefore Leopard 1. Now Leopard 1, the idea behind it, whopping great big MTU diesel in the rear, giving it a huge amount of power. Torsion bar suspension, again giving it really good mobility. Relatively thin and light armour. The German experience from World War II was actually something's going to get you in the end, so why not go for speed as your